Warlord, Saga of the Storm, Into the Accordlands, Story number 9, Pale Disjointed Things, by Graham Moyer. The Nothrog's teeth gnashed and eyes flared with a final surge of fury as he tried to grab at her. Tazian had severed the ligaments of the brute's shoulder minutes ago, and the Nothrog could barely move his arm. He whimpered, furious and helpless. The two of them lay in the mud of the village square, facing one another, the Nothrog's death spasms gradually slowing, Tazian gazing into the Nothrog's face. When she saw the creature's eyes go dull, Tazian rolled onto her back and looked up at the heavens. A haze of smoke smeared the crystal blue of the sky, and the death cries of the remaining Nothrog marred the tranquility of the morning. Tazian savored the squish of the mud on the fine scales of her cheek, then rose slowly, pushing off the dead Nothrog's head. At her touch, the flesh sloughed off, leaving an empty skull rapidly filling with mud. Around her, the village burned. Tazian's skeletons were pulling down the remaining stockades as bone fiends, vicious skeletal creatures made of a mud tangle of claws, skulls, and limbs, writhed from hut to hut. The fiends emerged from each dwelling soaked in blood, dragging the bodies of the former Nothrog residents into the square. "Julandra!" Tazian called. A slight woman broke away from the group of elves going through the village's treasures and made her way toward Tazian, head bowed. "Yes, Necromancer Dythanus?" "My cousins are due in soon from the forests. Take the others and see that the pavilion is prepared and mud-free. I'd hate for them to be uncomfortable." Tazian couldn't help the sarcasm that crept into her voice, and Julandra raised a hand to her face to conceal a smile as she nodded and scampered away. Tazian turned to gaze at the pile of Nothrog corpses. Traditionally, the job of an elven necromancer was to manipulate the four essences of life: blood, bone, flesh, and spirit, to gain immortality, or at the very least, temporal power through undead minions. But while the four essences worked harmoniously in life, their partnership rapidly disintegrated after death, and most necromancers specialized in only one or two. Tazian's house of Dythanus dominated the study of bone. Her cousins were coming from the seat of the house's power and would be eager to put her in her place. Tazian's mastery of the essence of bone wouldn't be enough to impress them. She'd have to find something else among this pile of dead Nothrog. The four cousins lounged on cushioned divans inside the pavilion that had been set up for them, resting their muddy boots on ironwood stools as they sampled the selection of pale ghost grapes Heron had brought from Tyranniel. "And that is why I haven't used Lyrish skeleton since," Balius finished with gusto, leaning back and grinning so that Heron and Raz could demonstrate their appreciation for his story. All four were grandchildren or great-grandchildren of Kulas Dythanus, the most powerful lich in existence and the de facto head of the house, but Balius was Kulas's favorite daughter's favorite grandson. Heron, Raz, and Tazian were in the house, but Balius was in the family. Balius glanced over at Tazian, at a remove from the others. Tazian forced her lips into a smile that seemed to satisfy him, then turned to glower at the muddy pile of Nothrog corpses just outside the tent. "Well, cousins, it's time we find out what kind of Nothrog Tazian has found for us out here in the hinterlands, wouldn't you agree?" Balius leapt to his feet, grinning, and he, Heron, and Raz made their way over to the corpse pile. Raz immediately began rummaging through the bodies, no doubt looking for the biggest. Heron stood back, pulled a book out of his satchel, and stuffed his nose into it. Balius raised his arms in front of him and began to magically rip bones out of the dead Nothrog, seemingly at random. A pale, disjointed thing began to take shape, twisting slowly in a gentle breeze. "Tazian," Balius called, "ready to become a real necromancer? Let's see what you countryfolk can do with these brutes." I have some ideas, Bale," Tazian replied, grinning wolfishly and crouching where she was in the muck. "You'll see." "That I shall, cousin," Balius laughed. "I've often wondered how you in the Outlands can cope without the knowledge of the capital. Raz, Heron, start us off." Raz's skeleton was a hodgepodge of the largest bones, slow but powerful. Heron's was something like a bone fiend, multi-limbed and multi-headed. The undead bowled into each other. Normally, a bone fiend would have been able to rip a slow skeleton like Raz's to pieces, but the Nothrog bones were more difficult to coordinate than human or elvish, and Raz's brute was able to parry the most crucial blows as Heron's fiend's arms, teeth, and claws slowly whittled away at it. Every now and again, the skeleton was able to launch a counterattack, smashing one of the bone fiend's many heads or arms into dust. It wasn't an impressive display. Raz had barely improved on skeletons, and Heron had made bone fiends worse. Across the muddy square, Balius yawned and made a quick gesture. His creation, more spiral than recognizable creature, whirled through the air towards the battling undead. Just before it made contact, the skeleton and bone fiend exploded into dust. Balius had fashioned the Nothrog's spirits into a scythe, anchored to their spiraling bones. Raz groaned and threw himself backwards into the mud. Heron sighed and pulled out his notes again. Balius turned towards Tazian and smiled, and the spirit razor rushed towards her. Tazian threw her arms up, and a chain of Nothrog limbs rose from the earth in front of her, flesh still attached to severed arms, legs, and torsos. As the razor careened into the chain, the flesh tore and blood splattered across the square, but the bones remained together. Another chain shot out of the mud and began to wrap itself around the spiral. Balius cursed and Tazian ducked to the side, moving around the square, eyes focused on Balius as he watched the spiral struggling against the chains. Tazian muttered under her breath, and another chain shot out of the earth, this time towards Balius, who stumbled backwards, just managing to summon a skeleton from the pile and throw it in front of the chain before it reached him. Down on one knee, Balius began to animate as much of the Nothrog pile as he could, sending some to tear at the chains while others moved to protect him as more corpse chains emerged from the mud. All the while, the entire square was spattered in blood as the spirit razor spun furiously into dead Nothrog flesh. With Balius distracted, Tazian made her move, darting towards him, low to the ground, one hand on her dagger, the other out in front of her, coalescing with magic. She closed her fist, and the chains across the muddy square rapidly exsanguinated, shooting darts of blood towards Balius and his wall of skeletons. The haughty elf yelped and ducked as the skeletons shielding him crumbled under the barrage. Then Tazian was on him, driving her knee into his chest and knocking him onto his back. Balius threw his arms up, but Tazian's dagger was already at his neck. She smiled down at him, baring filed teeth. "Welcome to the countryside, cousin." Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe, as well as share this video with anyone you know that might be interested in this story. Coming soon is story number 10, Wyvern's Call by Neil Foster.